Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Like my new curtain? Pretty depressing. Basically, I hope you don't mind me doing a short little review over here of the new Pharmakon album, Abandon. Pharmakon is the experimental music project of Margaret, whose last name I imagine is pronounced Chardier, if her last name is as French as I imagine it to be. She's been involved with the fringe side of music since she was about 17, and this new LP of hers seems to be her first kind of big commercial full-length effort. It's out now on Sacred Bones Records. Now, considering the genres that Margaret toys with on this record, noise music, a little bit of ambient music, power electronics, some people will say, I'm actually surprised that she doesn't have more music in her discography. I'm talking like hundreds upon hundreds of just home-recorded CDRs and cassettes of semi-improvised noise pieces. But actually that's not the case. In fact, her discography is somewhat sparse, and from what I read about her, she doesn't really improvise her pieces whatsoever. They're all very methodical, they're all very planned out, they have clear, cohesive patterns to them. And for sure, Abandon is an album, though it is noisy, it is pretty organized, it is pretty detailed, though still very over-the-top, as you can imagine, with plenty of blood-curdling shrieks coming out of Margaret's mouth on some of these tracks, especially the opener on here, which really, to me, feels like Margaret's mouth is just Pandora's box. She just opens it and pretty much every sound you could imagine being in hell comes out. It's no surprise to me that she describes her music in a way to be kind of an exorcism. For sure, it feels that way. Now, as far as lyrical content, what she is saying, if in fact she is saying anything, is pretty indecipherable, though that doesn't necessarily ruin the tracks for me. Really, her vocals are just for added sound, added effect, if you will. As far as other sounds on this album, Margaret is pretty great when it comes to soundcraft, whether it be some very murky vocals that might be performed live, might be pre-recorded and then kind of looped and layered on top of one another to make this kind of psychedelic, eerie wall of vocals, which happens on the second half of the track, Ache. It's a really dreary atmosphere that this creates. Or whether it be just very droning, sharp, high-pitched, ear-piercing electronics, like on the track Pitted. And of course, on top of these very sharp electronics, Margaret is bringing these vocals that are just very stony, very cold, very deadpan. The song is backed up with this industrially flavored bang, clang percussion, and the drone at the end of this track gets so sharp. It gets so sharp as the song finishes. It's like dentist drills going straight into my skull. Even though this album can be pretty abrasive at times, it is somewhat hypnotic and kind of alluring with its eeriness, its ominousness, and its repetition. One of the tracks on here, Crawling on Bruised Knees, might be my favorite on this album. For one, there are these repetitious samples happening throughout the track that feels like Margaret was pointing a microphone at a low-flying plane. It does effectively create a very weird vibe for this tune. I like the very minimal repetitive beat on this track, the very treated vocals. It's like a robot just screaming for the end of its life, suffering in pain or something. The issue for me with this track and many other tracks, really just this album as a whole, is that there is ear-grabbing sound play and ferocity throughout this thing. But the songs and the sounds and the ideas really lose their luster over these 6 or 7 minute song lengths that really don't feature that much progression, in my opinion. A lot of the tracks on here just close out with me feeling like they didn't really do much outside of just repeat the original idea that it introduced, which of course was interesting when it was first introduced, but by the time the album is over, the song is over, rather, I'm just on the fence. The songs on here only end up, to me, being memorable for their elements, not really how they assembled them. And of course, the very disjointed 27-minute long closing track on here, which I suspect was kind of added as an album-only track on iTunes to get people to buy the whole LP as opposed to just a few songs off of it. That track really just didn't do anything for me and sort of epitomizes my issue with this album at times. It's that it can be intense, but the intensity doesn't really progress or go much of anywhere. A lot of ideas on here are pretty good, but very disjointed and don't build on one another, really. For sure, I'm looking forward to future music coming out of this project. There is a lot of potential here, I think. Margaret, like I said, is great when it comes to intensity and when it comes to mood and when it comes to sounds. It's just building these songs out to something that feels engaging for 6 or 7 minutes that I think needs to happen. Plus, there's just a handful of songs on this LP, just 4 tracks outside of the very long closing track. Of course, on a future Pharmakon release, I would want to see some more material as well. Yeah, I'm just sort of on the fence with this LP. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Love it, hate it, why? And that's it. Pharmakon, Anthony Fantano, forever.